This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, my name is Becca Briers, and this is Multi-Story, the podcast from BBC England which celebrates the colourful and often surprising life experiences of people from up and down the country. Today's episode is about legacy, of people, of culture, and of place. And we're starting in a very lovely place.
These your mates, your stable mates. Hey. Okay, let's pull to the side. Let's not scare anybody. You alright, guys?
Yeah.
Good.
This is Freedom, chatting to me as we lead Rain, a former racehorse, for a walk along a country lane, alongside beautiful Leicestershire countryside on a glorious blue sky sunny day. But this isn't the environment Freedom was surrounded by regularly growing up.
We lived in the city, so there was no opportunity for us to work with animals, you know what I mean? It just wasn't something that was seen as normal. So, you know, I wanted to be a vet without actually having an opportunity to be close to animals, apart from your domesticated pets like your dogs and your cats and whatnot. You know, we would never have the opportunity to see horses, sheep, cows, that type of thing. We would witness when we would be on a train or on a coach or in a car, and we're driving down the motorway and whatnot. And, you know, you look out through the window and you see all the animals in the field. They're the only opportunities where we had chances to engage with these kind of animals.
That was until he turned 14, when his parents decided to relocate the family and things changed dramatically for Freedom.
I was at that age where I had a set group of friends, I was settled, I was popular in school, everything was going really nice, and then I got ripped away to the Caribbean. So I was not happy at all.
Even with the better weather?
Even with the better weather, you couldn't convince me. I think the only thing that I was happy about was that, I had this understanding that I had an uncle over there and he had racehorses and I'd be able to work and see them. That was the only thing that was really appealing to me. Everything else was not impressed.
Looking back, Freedom describes his first few months in Antigua as a kind of depression. One that he gradually came out of as he settled into island life, meeting more of his extended family, making friends, embracing the fresh air, colourful wildlife and a new way of speaking.
You kind of just don't notice it, you know what I mean? You just kind of adjust and get used to where you are, and then you kind of slowly start to forget about England, and at the same time as you're forgetting, your accent's changing. I was speaking proper, fluent patois. And,
of course, there were the horses.
In the Caribbean, they just tell you, jump on the horse and just ride it. There's no riding schools in the Caribbean, you know what I mean? So there's just big fields. So I remember my first time ever on a horse was, I had a lead rope like this, and I tied it to the horse's head collar and put a blanket on its back, and I just jumped on it and just went. You fall off a few times, and then you realise that, you're quite a good rider.
He and his brother supplemented their learning by spending hours studying jockeys and training, and then mimicking the techniques they saw on donkeys. Freedom quickly became a skilled rider and handler of the horses at his uncle's stables, and by 17 was training winning racehorses. But not everything was so great.
My life was very different to a normal teenager's life, you know. My family were a bunch of characters. We was a notorious family, so to speak.
And when you say notorious?
Just involved in a lot of hustling, yeah? A lot of illegal hustling, yeah? Okay. So my life wasn't very happy outside of the horses, and, you know, I found solace and I found peace, again, working with these animals. So I kind of made the decision that it was what I wanted to do, but I knew that I needed to get some qualifications because I wanted to dominate the Caribbean. I knew that England was a top place for racehorses, and I knew that, I could go back there and get super qualified, come back to Antigua and just rule the whole Caribbean. So that was my ultimate aim, you know, with the animals.
So, age 19, Freedom came back to the UK to study horse breeding and stud management at a college in Leicestershire.
It was a massive culture shock, to tell you the truth. You know, I totally forgot that England is England and Antigua is Antigua. And in England, you know, it's predominantly white British. And I kind of forgot about that. So it was a culture shock to find that I was the only black dude at my equestrian college. There was no other black youths, people that was into horses. You know what I mean? They all found it strange as to, why are you dealing with horses? Like, what happened there? How did that happen? How did that come about, so to speak?
Is this the white kids or the
both kids
back?
both sets.
Yeah, no one could understand it.
No, because I used to get hammered with questions by people from my own community, and I used to get hammered by questions by people from the equestrian community. You know what I mean? None of them could understand how this came to happen. There was no one really like myself in the equestrian world over here. My accent was totally different. People didn't really understand me so well. I used to get undermined a lot of the time. So they used to think I didn't know anything, and I had more experience than nearly all of the kids, if not all of them, at the college, and a lot of the teachers as well. I had a strong racing background. They might know dressage and show jumping and stuff, but I knew everything about racing. And I guess also just my mannerism. You know, a lot of the kids at the college were posh kids that came from wealthy backgrounds and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I came from the inner city ghetto. So I'm just going to walk. You walk forward a bit, Beth.
Yeah. As part of his college course, Freedom had to find a work placement. And whereas most of his fellow students stayed local, he set his sights on something bigger. Applying to be a groom at an Arabian stud farm in West Sussex. He got the job.
Lovely place. The owners, yard manager and that lot were brilliant people. But it's the first time that I really experienced racism and that. Because the grooms and that, the staff, they weren't so pleasant, you know what I mean? And I had to share a house with them. Initially, things started off really well, but then in the last year, things just went pear-shaped.
After 2 years, Freedom decided it was time to move on and successfully applied for a job as a stallion man at a top stable, a big and exciting step up. He had a 2-week grace period between jobs in which he went home to Leicester.
My brother had just come back from the Caribbean. You know, I was spending time with him, and I was spending time in that 2 weeks with all my friends. I'm talking like my ghetto friends, yeah? And I was running around with them for like 2 weeks, and I got comfortable doing that. And I was to question myself, why don't I go back into that horse world just to get abused and stuff like that? You know what I mean? And in the end, I just didn't turn up. And I remember my phone going crazy, and I just wouldn't answer it because I didn't enjoy it no more. You know what I mean? I didn't want to go back into feeling, you know, in feeling isolated. Sometimes I reflect on that because it was a top job that came with top prospects. And, you know, if I would decided to have taken that job, my life would have went in a totally different direction.
Instead, Freedom went and got what he calls a normal crappy job. A few, actually. He admits he struggled with not being the boss, but eventually he found a good fit with youth work, which led him to being offered a role pulling together a community event in the city called Black Futures.
And one of the activities within the event was an equestrian experience on a mechanical horse that went like this, yeah? So I had that in this room and had a massive queue. I had this guy who was about 6'7", wanted to ride the horse. It's like on the horse, whoa. And I had little kids and parents and everyone loved this mechanical horse thing. And I thought, boy, if they love that like that, I need to start doing some other stuff with them around horse riding and stuff. So I used to take groups of youths out to stables, just like for horse riding. And it was really popular and it worked really well. And then I had my own kids. And then it dawned on me how much that my own kids would miss out on if they never had an opportunity to work with horses. They never would have understood what their dad used to do, you know what I mean? And it annoyed me, you know what I mean? So it was my own kids that kind of prompted me to kind of get back into horses, and working with all the young people through the youth clubs and stuff that prompted me to get back into horses. I used to think if I had my own thing, it would be so good. And yeah, it was a combination of my experiences in the equestrian world over here, the youth work I used to do, having my own kids, that kind of gave me that motivation to set up something for myself that not only would give my own kids an opportunity to get into horses, but all kids from the inner city. And here we are today.
The Urban Equestrian Academy is currently operating from stables on a farm just outside the city, where they have 9 horses in their care and give hundreds of kids the opportunity to give riding a go. Kids like Kanan.
I've always been animal orientated, so I've always loved animals my whole life, and I've always wanted to be a vet.
Now this might sound like a familiar story. Young boy from inner city Leicester who wants to be a vet. But whereas for Freedom it took going to Antigua to find his passion, for Kanan, well, there was freedom. Kanan had actually already been to college to do a course in animal care, but he was struggling to progress much further.
I applied for a few jobs in like vets and stuff as just like trainee, and just try to help out and like certain things just to get a bit of experience. And I was applying everywhere for work experience as well, and I just didn't get no replies. And the ones that did reply, they just didn't follow up on things, and so I just kind of went into like a little pit where I just thought, oh, I might not get nowhere.
And then one day he was sat just scrolling on Facebook when he happened across one of Freedom's posts about urban equestrian.
I messaged him and said, oh, could I come down and volunteer and just like help out?
For Kanan, then aged 19, this was purely about being close to animals. Any kind of animals. But if you're volunteering at a stables, you might as well have a go at riding.
I was there for probably about a week, maybe, and he thought, you know what, let me just get you on a horse and see if you can do anything. And I was trotting in his outdoor school for the first day on like a lunge line, and it was complete havoc. I couldn't rise, I couldn't do anything. Literally, I was steering wrong. I was going around, almost crashed into the girl that was rigging on the lunge line. It was crazy.
A week later, and Freedom took him out for a hack to give Kanan a chance to try riding in an open field.
I ended up galloping up the field without even knowing that I was galloping. I've been a bit of like adrenaline junkie, I'd say I am, because I like the feeling of like speed and just feeling a bit like free and open. It was like a different feeling to like experience that on a horse. I think that's what drove me to keep going, if you know what I mean.
Kanan appeared to be a natural and continued to gain experience at the stables, to the point where Freedom allowed him to take out their newest acquisition, Rain, the former racehorse who's already featured on this podcast.
We let him go on her, and I remember very clearly that I gave him the instruction he's only to just walk her, because she was brand new, just come off the racetrack. He took her out for a hack with another one of our horses, another one of our young people, and it was a few days after he sent me a video, and the video was of him going full speed on her. And he literally sent me a text saying, I told you I could do it. And I never had no doubt he could do it. I just didn't want him to do it, because anything happens, you know what I mean? We're in trouble. So I had to have that conversation with, I gave him a good telling off, to tell you the truth. But at the same time, I called up my mates at British Racing School and said, you need to come and see this kid, he's bloody talented.
I never heard of the British Racing School. Like, I've never ever in my life heard of it, and I've never thought about ever being a jockey or even training to ride racehorses. So it was a bit strange. So I had to do a little bit of research and try, kind of like seeing what the industry's about, kind of thing. But yeah, I was all for it, because I thought, you know what, this might be a turning point in a good way.
Kanan had to pass an interview and an unexpected fitness test to get in.
Do you know what? I have to give it to them jockeys. They are super fit. Yeah, it really did took a toll on me.
Starting riding school meant relocating to Newmarket, leaving home for the first time.
When I got to the racing school, I was so homesick for the first, say, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I just couldn't just kind of settle. It was just like a big change for me, like to get out of home and not be around like my family and be in Leicester and like not knowing anyone and things like that. Like it was just a whole different kind of experience for me.
But routine helped. Getting up to get to the yard at 6 a.m, lots of mucking out, theory and practical lessons, and living in close quarters with the other students, all of whom had been riding for years and years, rather than just a few months like Kanan.
Eventually, by the end of the course, it was literally like my whole course was all like a little family kind of thing. It was a really good experience. I don't think I could forget.
Kanan graduated from riding school last September at a socially distanced ceremony watched by his mum and girlfriend.
And my mum was amazed. She didn't really think anything of it, like that it would be something that I'd pursue, if you know what I mean, because she just thought, oh yeah, I'm just going to go volunteer and that's it. She never thought I'd end up being like in a racing school and go into like be working in racing and things like that. So yeah, she was really proud of me and stuff. It was good to see a good smile on her face.
Kanan is still in Newmarket, currently doing an 18-month apprenticeship, working at racehorse stables and focusing on improving his fitness and his yard and riding skills, with the ultimate aim of getting his jockey licence in the not-too-distant future.
If I win one race, I'd be happy with myself. I'd be proud. I'm from Leicester. I never freaking thought about doing this. I never knew that I'd be doing anything like this. I'd just be happy to make that one race happen, even if it is one race and I win. I'll be happy, I don't mind.
Back in Leicester, and Freedom has got his own big ambitions, starting with securing land in the city centre to make the academy even more accessible to inner city kids, and opening up franchises in other UK cities so horse riding can become a norm for more young people. And in doing so, he hopes to change the culture of the equestrian world as a whole.
Kanan and them kind of see through what I went through as a teenager compared to what he's gone through as a teenager. He's come through an organisation called Urban Equestrian that has people that look like him, has a comfortable environment in terms of the young people and the members that look like him. We understand his language, his mannerisms, where he's come from. We're comfortable with that. He's been at peace, so he's had it nice. He's been allowed to be himself instead of having to pretend to be someone else to fit into this world. If it's one thing that we do at Urban Equestrian is we allow culture to be freely expressed, and that's important.
And do you kind of empower kids to say, well, yeah, like Kanan, he's going on to the next step now. He's entering a world where maybe that's not the case.
Yes.
Do you try and empower them to keep at that?
100%, yeah. So again, the kind of mentoring that we give here is to feel comfortable in your skin and not to bow down to pressure and to trailblaze rather than being a statistic. Make it easier for others behind you to come through and make it others to see like, yeah, I love this guy. He's being himself in the horse world. Man, I wish this was around when I was around. And, you know what I mean? You'll encourage others to step up, speak out in relation to anything, and be proud of who they are and have a sense of ownership. They should feel like everyone else. They shouldn't have to feel, oh, this is great, isn't it? They should feel this is normal. This is what we do.
And that's not it. Freedom has plans to move Urban Equestrian into the world of racing, and for him to be the first black horse trainer in the UK.
My legacy is to produce more Kanans, you know? If I was to pass away tomorrow, God forbid, I'd be happy with what I've achieved in terms of just Kanan. And not only just Kanan, a lot of ethnic minorities in Leicester riding horses comfortably, happy, you know what I mean, and more confident. Right now, if it was to stop now, I'd be happy with that.
And it sounds like Freedom's legacy is in safe hands with Kanan.
I just want to kind of like push myself out there and get known, so like maybe some of the kids like me, like around my area, or kids that are from like different backgrounds and stuff, and I think, oh, okay, look, he's done it. He came from a city area and he's made it up to the top as well.
Today's second story is also about someone finding their vocation in life after an unexpected change in location. Back in spring 2016, Zhao was working in Leeds city centre, when her husband Richard rang and suggested they meet in a cafe for a chat over lunch.
And we sat down and he had this idea. He said, "How do you feel about going on an adventure?" And I was like, "What kind of an adventure?" He said, "Why don't we go and live in India?" And I was like, "India?" And that did take me by surprise, because originally in my mind I thought maybe he was talking about a short break, or maybe we were going to go travelling. And at that time, we'd been married for 3 years and we were settled with good jobs and a lovely home. And naturally, the next stage in our life would be to have a family. And he continued, "Let's spend a year living out there in Navsari." I was like, wow. So Navsari is this small city in the northwest of Gujarat, and it's also where my ancestors are from. It's surrounded by rural villages and farmlands, and it's very traditional. So traditional that practically no one speaks English. And what's more, it's a dry state, so no one drinks alcohol. There's no bars, no clubs. It was going to be interesting to see how people came together to socialise. We arrived just as the monsoons had ended and we were entering winter. But if you can imagine, winter there is like a really fresh British summer. And the houses and flats were very interesting. They're all different shapes and sizes. And the exteriors painted in pastel pinks and yellows and mint greens. And the mornings, the skies were pink. And you could see peacocks on the rooftops of the neighbouring villages. And as the day unfolded, there were people gathering. You could see cattle on the road, and dogs, they'd come too, and motorbikes everywhere. And it'd just be like chaos, everything, the hustle and bustle of India, but an organised chaos. And it was exciting, because this is going to be our home for the next year. First thing you do is, like when you arrive at anywhere new, you kind of walk around the area, walk around the neighbourhood, see where all your local shops are. We decided to introduce ourselves to our neighbours and went over to everyone's houses. They were a bit wary of us, not knowing who we were. And in India, the houses get passed on from generation to generation, so everyone knows who lives where. It was nice to meet full families that lived together and how everyone looked out for each other, and that old-fashioned way of community really coming together. It was lovely to see that. And they don't just take care of themselves, they take care of guests, they take care of strangers. In India, that's one thing that they do really beautifully. They make you feel welcomed. So Richard isn't Indian. He definitely stood out. Everyone is Indian, and to them, someone who's an Indian from the West, like myself, they can tell and I stand out. Let alone someone whose skin is a different colour, who is very tall. It's such an interesting thing because Richard comes from Norfolk. He comes from near King's Lynn, and most of the people in the countryside from around those parts are white British English. So to have the roles reversed, it was very, very interesting. But he fitted in perfectly. They all loved him, like really loved him. One thing that I used to do a lot in England is I'd start my mornings off with a morning run. And when you're in India, because of where it is and the heat, I couldn't run. So I was just feeling frustrated with myself and saying to Richard, what do I do? And he was like, you've got all this space, do yoga. So when I grew up, I used to know that yoga happened in the mandir, in the temple. My grandma and all the other grannies used to do it. And I used to be in primary school and meet my granny there. And they'd all be sitting on the floor, rolling their ankles. And I'd join in. And that's what I used to think yoga was. Just a little get-together of grannies and exercises to keep your body in check. I didn't know how deep it was, how rich it was. Back then, being so young, I used to find it strange. And they tried to teach me that it's good for you, you need to look after your body. But back in your late teens, 20s, you are in quite a selfish space where you're not learning about your body, you're not that interested in that. So in India, I was having a transformation in all different levels. I'd practice yoga in the mornings and I'd practice yoga in the evening. And Richard actually used to watch me. He was like, you're actually getting quite good at this. You're in the heart of where yoga started, you're in the perfect place. Have you ever thought about getting qualification, learning more about it? And for me, I was like, okay, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, why don't I do that? And so when I was thinking of where to do it, there's places all over. Something drew me to this course in Rishikesh. Rishikesh is in the foothills of the Himalayas where Ganga, or the Ganges, flows through. I just knew I wanted to see Ganga. It said if you have a dip in the Ganges or Ganga, you drop your old selves and you re-emerge as someone new. And that was something beautiful that we could both do. So we took a 30-hour train ride. And if you can imagine what it's like, a long train journey in India where different people come on and off, different dialects, different foods, but also trains are not clean. So just living that dust, living that dirt. And that's one thing that India even teaches you as well. It teaches you to accept and not have high expectations, just to be grateful and accept. Got the train to Rishikesh. First impressions of Rishikesh, it was really amazing. It felt spiritual. You cross the big long bridge as you enter, and the bridge full of monkeys. Monkeys are everywhere in Rishikesh. It's the mountains, it's the hillsides, loads of temples, and everything's really open. Also, all these huge temples at the riverbank. So at night when they do the Aarti, which is a ceremony, you can see all the reflections in the water, you can smell incense everywhere, and the singing, everyone singing together. Even when you're not a part of it, you can still feel that spirituality floating in the air. You can still feel that blessing coming over you. I think it was more amazing for me being born in a culture that I was so grateful being impressed in, where we had the temple outside my grandma's house, and my grandma and granddad and dad and mum are very integrated in the culture and society, and I was as well growing up. So it was all so familiar, and it felt like I'd arrived home. That's what was beautiful. It felt like I'd arrived home. It felt so different. It felt so different because most of the teachers there were Indian, and they were teaching from love and respect and from their ancestors. So Sarita, one of my teachers, they would just come in traditional Indian clothes and do yoga, cotton. And there's no hierarchy or authority, but there was respect. You respected them. And in the West, I don't feel like there is that. The teachers are on another plane and the students are on another plane. The people on my course, there would have been about 40 people, and I was the only Indian person. Most of them were, as you can stereotypically imagine in the West, what you see on Instagram. 20-year-olds in Lycra come to get a qualification thinking that they're going to come to a retreat, and they had a real shock at how basic things were, and for them it was a real struggle to accept what they'd signed themselves up for a month. They were also surprised to find that yoga or yogis were vegetarians, which they found quite hard. And I felt like I was mothering a lot of them as well, because you're all in it together, but you want them to understand the culture and you want them to see the good in it. It saddens me because I feel like in the West, things like fads like beer yoga or goat yoga shows little to no respect for the teachings, and it isn't culturally appropriate. It's actually offensive. Yoga teaches you to live a life of harmony and respect for yourself as well as all beings, and that means not bringing creatures and animals into it. Yoga is not a sport, it's not a hobby, it's more of a lifestyle choice, a conscious path to a better you. So as a yoga teacher, I'm mindful and respectful of that ancient art and its origins and that ancient Vedic text. So I believe as a teacher who's a practicing yogi, or you should be a practicing yogi, we have a moral obligation to promote peaceful attitude within your actions and your principles. It teaches you to be non-intrusive, peaceful and humble. But as we know, too often we see images on social media of teachers who've lost this meaning. You know, we see them wearing little clothing to objectify their bodies, and it takes away from that inward journey about learning about self. Yoga is the meditation, it's the pranayam, the breathing, it's the all-encompassing, the mantra chanting. It's not about look at me, look what I can do. There is a cultural sensitivity, and I feel like that's being missed. Yoga is something I live and breathe, and I want it to be a gateway for other people, not just something they pick up and drop. It is damaging to the beautiful ancient practice.
Jal is currently planning another relocation with Richard, from Leeds back to her home city of Preston, where she hopes to be teaching yoga very soon. My name is Becca Briers, and you've been listening to Multi-Story, a podcast from BBC England. Thanks on today's episode to Vershanayi from BBC Radio Lancashire for her beautiful telling of Jal's yoga journey. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode, but until then, make sure you never miss another by subscribing to Multi-Story on BBC Sounds.